I never imagined those words would come out of the mouth of someone I helped create a better life. Someone for whom I opened the doors of my home and heart without hesitating for a single second. My name is Helena. I'm 63 years old, and throughout my entire life, I built a family based on love, respect, and true unity. I married young to Roberto, my eternal companion, and together we raised our only son, Raphael, with all the affection and dedication that parents can offer. Raphael was always a sweet, polite, hard-working boy, and when he grew up and became a good man, my heart overflowed with pride. I thought I had done everything right, that I had prepared my son to choose a good companion, someone who would share our values, and who would become part of our family with the same intensity with which we would receive her. But life has a cruel way of showing us that things don't always turn out as we plan, and that's exactly what I discovered when Raphael brought Mariana to our house for the first time 5 years ago. Mariana was beautiful, I won't deny that. She had that type of beauty that draws attention, with long dark hair, expressive eyes, and a smile that seemed to light up any room. At first, I really tried to like her. I tried to open my heart and receive her as the daughter I never had, after all. Raphael was completely in love, and his eyes shone in a way I had never seen before. I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to build his own family, so I swallowed my first impressions and decided to give a sincere chance to this young woman my son had chosen. But from the first dinner at our house, something deeply bothered me, a kind of maternal sixth sense that screamed inside me saying that something was wrong, something I couldn't identify precisely, but that was there, latent, waiting for the right moment to fully reveal itself. Mariana had a particular way of looking at things in our house. Her eyes traveled through each room, each piece of furniture, each detail of the decoration, with an attention that went beyond simple, polite curiosity. It was as if she were making a mental inventory, calculating values, measuring possibilities, and this made me extremely uncomfortable, even though I tried to ignore this feeling. As the months passed, the encounters became more frequent, and I tried more and more to connect with Mariana, ask questions about her life, her dreams, her family. But the answers were always vague, always superficial, as if she had built an invisible wall between us that didn't allow any genuine closeness. She spoke little about her parents, said only that they lived in another city, and that they weren't very close, which left me with a tightness in my heart, because family had always been everything to me, and I couldn't understand how someone could be so distant from their own roots. Roberto, my husband, also noticed certain strange attitudes, but he was always more reserved with his opinions and preferred not to create conflicts, especially because Raphael seemed so happy beside her that any negative comment would be interpreted as an attempt to sabotage the relationship. So we swallowed our concerns and continued smiling, continued receiving Mariana in our home, preparing special meals, buying gifts on commemorative dates, doing everything to make her feel part of our family, even when she never showed the slightest gratitude or genuine reciprocity. The wedding happened 2 years after they started dating, a beautiful ceremony in an elegant hall that we, Raphael's parents, insisted on paying for because we wanted our son to have the wedding of his dreams, even if it meant using a considerable part of our savings. Mariana chose every detail of the party, from the flowers to the menu, and I confess that some of her choices were too extravagant for our taste. But we didn't question anything, because we wanted to see them happy. We wanted that day to be perfect for them. Throughout the entire wedding preparation, I tried to get involved, offered help countless times, suggested ideas, made myself available to accompany her shopping. But Mariana always had a ready excuse, always said she had already resolved everything, or that she preferred to do it alone. And this hurt me deeply, because I dreamed of that moment of complicity between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. That moment of building memories together that I saw in so many other families. On the wedding day, I wore my best dress, had my hair done at the salon, tried to be radiant and happy despite the tightness I felt in my chest. And when I saw my son at the altar waiting for his bride, tears ran down my face because he looked so handsome, so emotional, so full of hope that I prayed that everything would work out, that my premonitions were wrong, and that Mariana really loved my son as much as he loved her. The first months of marriage seemed calm on the surface. They rented an apartment not too far from our house, and Raphael continued visiting us regularly, always with that smile on his face, always talking about the plans they had for the future. And I clung to each of his words as if they were anchors of hope that everything was well. But little by little, subtly, the visits began to decrease. The calls became more spaced out, and when I asked Raphael if everything was okay, he always said yes, that they were just busy with work, with organizing the new house, with the routine of newlyweds. And I tried to believe, tried not to be that meddling and possessive mother-in-law that nobody wants to have. But a mother feels when something isn't right with her child. It's a primitive instinct that can't be explained with words. And I felt that Raphael was different, more distant, more tired, as if he were carrying an invisible weight that he didn't want to share with us. Roberto also noticed the change but maintained his posture of not interfering, said they were adults and needed to resolve their own issues. But I couldn't be calm, couldn't simply accept that my son was distancing himself without understanding why. It was on a Sunday in October, exactly 8 months ago, that everything began to crumble in a way I could never have predicted even in my worst nightmares. Raphael had called during the week saying he would like to come have lunch with us on the weekend, and my heart leaped with joy because it had been almost a month since we had seen him in person, so I spent the entire week planning the perfect lunch, buying the ingredients to make his favorite dishes, tidying the house, preparing everything with the greatest care. When Sunday arrived, I woke up early and started cooking. The house soon filled with the delicious aromas of home-cooked food, and I was radiant, anxious to hug my son and satisfy a bit of the longing that consumed me. When the doorbell rang at noon, I ran to the door with a huge smile on my face, opened it expecting to see Raphael alone, as he had said he would come. But to my surprise, Mariana was beside him, and the smile on my face wavered for a fraction of a second before I composed myself and greeted them warmly, inviting them to come in. Mariana entered the house with that posture that always bothered me, looking around as if she were evaluating everything, and I tried to ignore that uncomfortable feeling that settled in my stomach, concentrating on being the perfect hostess and making them feel welcome. The lunch started peacefully. We talked about trivial matters, about Raphael's work, about some projects they had for the apartment, and I served the food I had prepared with so much love, observing with satisfaction when Raphael repeated the dish twice and praised every bite. But Mariana barely touched the food, pushed the pieces around the plate with her fork, and when I asked if she hadn't liked it or if she preferred something else, she simply shrugged and said she wasn't very hungry, which seemed extremely rude to me considering the effort I had made. Roberto tried to keep the conversation lively, telling some funny stories from work. But the atmosphere was strange. There was a tension in the air that nobody wanted to openly acknowledge, and I could see that Raphael was uncomfortable, nervously fidgeting with the napkin and avoiding my gaze in a way that broke my heart. When we finished the main meal and I began to collect the plates to serve dessert, Mariana finally broke the silence in a way that would change everything forever. her words coming out of her mouth with a calculated coldness that completely froze me, right there in the dining room, with the plates in my hands. "Helena, we need to talk about some things," she said with a firm and emotionless voice, and I immediately felt my heart accelerate because her tone didn't bode anything good. I slowly put the plates back on the table, sat down again in the chair, and looked at her, waiting for her to continue, while Raphael beside her seemed to want to disappear, his eyes fixed on the empty plate in front of him, as if he were looking for an escape route. Mariana continued speaking, saying that she and Raphael had discussed a lot about the family dynamic, and that they had come to the conclusion that they needed to establish some clear boundaries, and my stomach began to churn, because I knew that what was coming next wouldn't be pleasant at all. She said that I was too present in their lives, that I called too much, that I asked too much, that I wanted to know about everything, and that this was suffocating their relationship, preventing them from building their own identity as a couple. Each word that came out of her mouth was like a stab in my chest, and I looked at Raphael desperately, looking for some sign that he disagreed, that he would defend me. But he remained silent, and that silence hurt more than any word that Mariana could pronounce. I tried to defend myself, tried to explain that I just cared, that I just wanted to be present in my son's life as I had always been, that I had no intention of bothering or invading their space. But Mariana interrupted me with an impatient gesture of her hand and continued with her cruel and rehearsed speech. She said that Raphael needed to cut the umbilical cord, that he needed to choose between being a son or being a husband, and that as long as I continued interfering in their lives, their marriage would be at risk. I felt tears begin to form in my eyes, but forced them back, because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Didn't want to seem weak or manipulative. So I swallowed the lump in my throat and tried to maintain my composure even when my world was crumbling around me. Roberto beside me had turned pale, his hands clenched into fists on the table, and I could feel the tension emanating from him like heat waves. But he also remained silent, because we were both in shock, completely unable to process what was happening there at our own dining table. But the worst was yet to come, and when Mariana pronounced those fateful words that would be engraved in my soul forever, I felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath my feet, and I was falling into an endless abyss. "You need to understand one thing, Helena," she said, looking directly into my eyes with a coldness that made me tremble. "You are not part of our family. You are just Raphael's mother, and that doesn't give you the right to interfere in our decisions or in our life. From now on, we want space, we want distance, and you need to respect that if you don't want to lose your son completely." The words echoed in the room like gunshots, and I was completely paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to react, while Mariana got up from the table pulling Raphael by the arm, and he finally looked at me with an expression of guilt and anguish, but said nothing, absolutely nothing in my defense, simply let his wife destroy me with words, and accompanied her to the door without a single word of comfort or explanation. When the door closed behind them, I collapsed. All the tears I had held back exploded at once, and Roberto hugged me while I cried inconsolably, feeling as if I had lost my son forever, as if an entire lifetime of love and dedication had been thrown in the trash, as if it was worth absolutely nothing. The days that followed were the darkest of my life. I could barely get out of bed, could barely eat or sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, trying to understand where I had gone wrong, what I had done to deserve such cruelty and rejection. Roberto tried to console me, saying that everything would be okay, that Raphael would eventually realize the mistake he was making. But I couldn't find hope in his words, because the pain was too great. The feeling of loss was overwhelming, I spent weeks in a fog of sadness, functioning on autopilot, doing household chores mechanically without really being present, and my friends began to notice that something was wrong because I had always been a cheerful and sociable person. But suddenly, I had become a shadow of myself. I tried to call Raphael a few times, but he never answered, and when I sent messages, the responses were short and cold, saying only that he was fine and that he needed time, and those generic words hurt me because I knew they weren't really from him. That Mariana was dictating every word he wrote, controlling every aspect of our communication. I began to question everything, every memory, every moment we spent together, trying to identify where things had started to go wrong. But I couldn't find any satisfactory answer because I really had tried to do everything right, had tried to be the best mother possible, had supported all of my son's decisions, had received Mariana with open arms, even when my instinct told me there was something wrong. Guilt consumed me. I wondered if perhaps I really had been too present, too protective, if perhaps I had created an unhealthy dependence without realizing it. But then I remembered all the times I had given space, all the times I had respected their decisions even when I disagreed, and I realized that I had done nothing but love my son unconditionally, and loving shouldn't be a crime. Roberto began to worry about my mental and physical health. I had lost several kilos, had deep dark circles under my eyes, and my gaze had lost that sparkle that had always characterized me. So he insisted that I seek help, that I talk to a therapist, and reluctantly I agreed because I knew I couldn't continue in that state, that I needed to find a way to deal with that pain that was destroying me from the inside. The therapy helped a little. Talking to an impartial person who could give me a different perspective on the situation made me realize that I had done nothing wrong, that the problem wasn't in me, but in the unhealthy dynamic that Mariana was creating, isolating my son from his family of origin to have total control over him. The therapist explained to me that this is a common pattern in abusive relationships, where one of the partners gradually cuts all of the other person's ties with friends and family to have absolute power. And that revelation was both liberating and terrifying because it meant that my son was trapped in a situation much more serious than I imagined. I began to research the subject, read articles, talk to other people who had gone through similar situations, and I discovered that I wasn't alone, that there were many parents who had been pushed away from their children by manipulative partners, and that gave me strength not to give up, to continue trying somehow to make my son see the truth, even if he didn't want to hear me at that moment. I decided that I needed to act, that I couldn't simply stand still waiting for things to resolve themselves magically. So I began to think of strategies for how I could get close to Raphael again, without giving Mariana reasons to push me away even further. I stopped calling and sending messages constantly, respecting the space they had asked for, but at the same time I began to send the short and affectionate messages occasionally, just saying that I loved him and that I was there for him whenever he needed, without making demands or invasive questions. I knew I needed to be patient, that I couldn't force anything. But I also knew that I couldn't give up on my son, couldn't simply accept that a selfish and manipulative person would take him out of my life forever. Roberto supported my decision but warned me not to create expectations that were too high, not to be disappointed if things didn't change. But I had faith, I had hope that eventually the truth would come to light and my son would realize what was happening. 3 weeks after that terrible lunch, exactly 21 days after Mariana had pronounced those cruel words that still echoed in my head every night before sleep, something completely unexpected happened that would change the entire dynamic of the situation. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when my phone rang, And when I looked at the screen and saw Raphael's name, my heart began to beat so hard I thought it would explode in my chest. I answered quickly, my voice trembling, when I said hello, and what I heard on the other end of the line made me freeze completely where I stood. It was Mariana, not Raphael, her voice sounding completely different from the cold and calculated tone she had used that Sunday. Now there was desperation, there was panic, there was something that sounded dangerously close to genuine terror. "Helena, you need to come here immediately. It's about Raphael. He's in the hospital. There was an accident at work," she said, stumbling over her words. And I didn't even wait for her to finish speaking. I simply hung up the phone, grabbed my purse and car keys, and ran out, shouting to Roberto, who was in the office, to accompany me immediately, because our son was in danger. The journey to the hospital was the longest of my life, even stepping hard on the accelerator and running all the yellow lights. It seemed like we would never get there, and my mind was filled with terrible scenarios, imagining what could have happened, how serious the accident would be, if my son was suffering, if he was in pain, if he had called for me. Roberto beside me tried to calm me down, saying that it probably wasn't anything too serious, that if it were something very serious, the hospital would have called. But his words didn't reassure me because I could feel deep in my soul that something was very wrong. That same maternal instinct that had warned me about Mariana from the beginning was now screaming that my son needed me. When we finally arrived at the hospital and ran to the reception asking for Raphael, the attendant directed us to the 3rd floor, and we climbed the stairs because we didn't want to wait for the elevator, our hearts racing from running and anxiety, until we finally reached the indicated corridor and saw Mariana sitting on a plastic bench, her face in her hands, her shoulders trembling with what appeared to be sobs. When she saw us, she immediately stood up and, to my complete shock, came toward me with outstretched arms, as if to hug me. But I instinctively took a step back because I couldn't simply forget what she had said to me, how much she had hurt me. And even with my son in danger inside there, I couldn't pretend that everything was fine between us. "Where is Raphael? What exactly happened? Is he okay? Has anyone talked to you yet?" I fired a sequence of questions without giving her time to answer, and Roberto went ahead, going to talk directly with a nurse who was passing through the corridor to obtain concrete information instead of depending on Mariana's words. The nurse explained that Raphael had suffered an accident at the construction site where he worked as an engineer. A structure had collapsed and he had been trapped under the rubble for almost half an hour until rescue arrived, and that he was being evaluated by doctors at that moment, but that, apparently, he had suffered a fracture in his left leg, some cuts and bruises, but that he was conscious and stable. The nurse's words brought immense relief, but also an even greater tightness in my heart, because my son had gone through something traumatic and I wasn't there. And worse, during the last few weeks he had been practically alone because Mariana had pushed me away from him. And that thought filled me with anger and resentment. We waited in the corridor for almost 2 hours, until finally a doctor came out and called us to talk, explaining in detail Raphael's injuries and saying that he would need to undergo surgery to put pins in the fractured leg, but that the prognosis was good and that he should recover completely with time and appropriate physical therapy. The doctor said we could see him briefly before he was taken to the operating room, and the 3 of us followed the nurse to a small room where my son was lying on a stretcher with a pale face marked by some scratches, his leg immobilized, and when his eyes met mine, he began to cry silently, tears running down his face as he extended one of his hands toward me. I ran to the stretcher and held his hand with both of mine, kissing his fingers repeatedly while also crying, saying that I was there, that he would be fine, that I wasn't going anywhere. And he squeezed my hand with surprising strength, considering his condition, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for everything," with a broken voice that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces, because I knew he was apologizing not just for that moment, but for everything that had happened in the last few weeks, for having allowed Mariana to treat me that way, for not having defended me when he should have. I told him there was nothing to apologize for, that I was there and always would be, that I loved him more than anything in this world, and we stayed there for a few minutes, just holding each other's hands, reconnecting that bond that had been so brutally attacked, but that had never been truly broken, because the love between mother and son is stronger than any attempt at destruction. Roberto also approached, put his hand on his son's shoulder and said words of comfort and encouragement. And in that moment I completely forgot that Mariana was there in the corner of the room, watching the scene in silence, because all that mattered was that my son was alive, was well, despite the scare, and that I had the opportunity to be beside him in that difficult moment. When the nurse said they needed to take Raphael to surgery, I kissed his forehead with all the care in the world, promised I would be waiting when he came out, and watched him being taken away, while my heart accompanied his every movement of the stretcher until it disappeared through the double doors of the operating room. It was during that long wait for the surgery, sitting in a claustrophobic waiting room with uncomfortable chairs and an old television playing quietly in the corner, that Mariana finally began to speak, and what she said caught me completely off guard. She started by apologizing, her voice low and hesitant, saying that she had been horrible to me, that she had no right to say those things, that she had acted in a cruel and unfair way. And I simply looked at her without saying anything, because I didn't know if those apologies were genuine or if they were just the result of fear and desperation from the situation. She continued talking, the words coming out faster and faster, as if she had been holding all of that for a long time, and now couldn't contain it anymore, saying that she had felt insecure from the beginning, that she saw how much Raphael loved me, and was afraid she would never be able to occupy such an important space in his life. So she decided that the best solution would be to push me away completely, create a barrier that would make him dependent only on her. She admitted that she had manipulated situations, distorted conversations, planted seeds of doubt in Raphael's head about my intentions, saying that I was controlling, that I didn't respect their privacy, that I wanted to separate them, and confessed that all of that were lies, exaggerations based on her own insecurities, and not on any real action on my part. Hearing that confession should have made me feel vindicated, validated. But all I felt was a deep sadness because that woman had almost destroyed my relationship with my son, because of her own internal demons, because of an insecurity that she could have worked on in much healthier ways, if only she had been honest from the beginning. Mariana continued saying that when she received the call about Raphael's accident, when she thought she might lose him, she realized how foolish she had been, how much she had wasted energy trying to push away the people who really loved him, instead of building bridges and creating a united and loving family. She said that during those terrible hours waiting for news while he was being rescued from the rubble, the only thing she could think about was how I must be feeling, how devastating it would be for a mother to receive that news. And it was then that she realized that I wasn't her enemy, that I had never been, that I was just a mother who loved her son and wanted the best for him, exactly as any mother would do. Tears ran down Mariana's face as she spoke, and I could see that those tears were genuine, that she really was sorry. But at the same time, I couldn't simply erase everything that had happened, all the nights I spent crying, all the pain I felt, all the suffering she caused not only to me but especially to Raphael himself by isolating him from his family. Roberto beside me was tense. I could feel that he was also struggling with his own emotions, wanting to protect me, but at the same time understanding that for Raphael's sake, we needed to find a way to move forward, to build some kind of functional relationship, even if it was never really close or trustworthy as I had dreamed it would be. When Mariana finally stopped talking and looked at me waiting for some kind of response, I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts and find the right words to express everything I was feeling in that so complex moment, loaded with conflicting emotions. Mariana. I began with a voice firmer than I expected considering the storm of emotions inside me. What you did was very serious. You not only hurt me but also hurt your own husband by depriving him of the love and support of his family. You created an artificial isolation that wasn't necessary, and that could have caused permanent damage to our relationship. I can't simply forgive and forget everything, immediately, because the wounds are still very recent, very painful. But for Raphael's sake, for his health, and for the recovery he's going to need in the coming weeks and months, I'm willing to try to build a new dynamic, but with very clear conditions. She nodded quickly, her eyes wide and attentive, waiting for me to continue, and Roberto placed his hand on mine, showing silent support. First, I continued, you will never again try to push me away from my son. You will never again manipulate situations or invent problems that don't exist. If you have any insecurity or concern, you will speak openly, and we will try to resolve them together as adults. Second, you will be honest with Raphael about what you did. You will tell him about the manipulations and lies, because he deserves to know the truth, and our relationship can only move forward if it's based on complete honesty. And third, you will seek professional help to work on these insecurities and learn healthy ways to deal with your fears instead of projecting them onto others and causing pain to the people around you. Mariana agreed with everything, said she would do anything, that she was willing to do therapy, that she would tell Raphael everything as soon as he was recovered enough to have this difficult conversation, and that she understood that she had to rebuild trust not only with me, but with Roberto as well, because she had disrespected both of us and our family as a whole. In that moment, I didn't feel affection for her, didn't feel that connection I had hoped to build with my daughter-in-law. But I felt something close to compassion, because she was clearly a wounded person, full of deep insecurities, and who had made terrible decisions based on fear instead of love. Raphael's surgery lasted 4 hours, 4 long hours of anxiety and silent prayers, and when the doctor finally came out saying that everything had gone perfectly, that the pins were in place, that Raphael was in recovery and would soon be taken to a room where we could see him, the relief we felt was indescribable. It was as if an enormous weight had been lifted from our shoulders, and we could finally breathe again. In the weeks that followed, I practically lived in that hospital, stayed with Raphael all day long, helping with everything he needed, talking to the doctors, making sure he was comfortable, and Mariana was also present but kept a certain distance, as if she were trying to respect the space I needed to reconnect with my son. Raphael was hospitalized for a week, and during that time we had several honest and deep conversations. Conversations we should have had a long time ago, where he told me how he had felt trapped in the middle of that situation, wanting to please his wife but at the same time missing his family, feeling the absence of our conversations, our laughter, our connection. He admitted that he knew Mariana was being unfair, but that he didn't have the strength to confront her, because every time he tried to defend our family, she would cry and say that he didn't love her enough, that he would always choose his parents over her, and that emotional manipulation left him paralyzed, not knowing how to act without hurting someone he loved. It was hard to hear all of that, to understand how much my son had suffered in silence trying to balance two forces that should be complementary, but that Mariana had turned into opposites. But at the same time it gave me hope, because Raphael was opening his eyes to the unhealthy dynamic that had been established, and was willing to make changes so that this would never happen again. When he was discharged and went home, we established a routine where I would visit him 3 times a week to help with physical therapy and basic care while he still had limited mobility. And those moments were precious for our reconnection, to rebuild the trust and affection we had always had. Mariana kept her promise and started therapy, and a few weeks later asked to have a conversation with all of us, where she confessed to Raphael everything she had done, all the manipulations and lies, and it was one of the most difficult conversations we had ever witnessed, because seeing Raphael process that betrayal, that breach of trust, from someone who should be his closest partner, was devastating. There were moments when I thought their marriage wouldn't survive that revelation. There were tears and screams, and a lot of pain being exposed, but Raphael also demonstrated a maturity that filled me with pride when he said he wanted to try to save the relationship, but that he also needed couples therapy, that they needed to completely rebuild the foundation of the marriage based on honesty and mutual respect, and not on manipulation and fear. They started doing therapy together, and gradually things got better, not overnight, not magically, but with a lot of hard work and difficult conversations, and willingness from both parties to make the necessary changes. I kept my expectations realistic. Didn't expect Mariana and I to become close friends or to have that mother-daughter relationship I had dreamed of. But I hoped we could coexist in a respectful and functional way for Raphael's sake. And slowly, that began to happen. Today, 6 months after that terrible accident, that paradoxically ended up being the catalyst for necessary changes, our family is in a much better place. There are still scars. There are still moments of tension. But there is open communication and honesty that didn't exist before. Raphael fully recovered from the surgery and returned to work. Mariana continues in therapy and has shown genuine changes in her behavior, being more open, more vulnerable, more willing to include family instead of pushing them away. And I learned valuable lessons about healthy boundaries, about trusting my instinct, but also about giving second chances when there is genuine remorse and real effort for change. Our family Sundays have been resumed, now with a different dynamic, more conscious, where everyone has a voice and space to express their needs and concerns without fear of judgment or retaliation. And although we can never completely erase what happened, we are building something new and stronger on the ruins of what was almost destroyed. The experience taught me that sometimes the biggest crises are necessary for important changes to happen, that sometimes we need to hit rock bottom to find the necessary strength to climb back up and build something better. I learned that a mother's love is truly unconditional and unbreakable, that no matter how many storms come, that bond remains strong and true, patiently waiting to be recognized and valued again. I also learned that people can change when they really want to, when they recognize their mistakes and are willing to do the hard work of personal growth and transformation. Although this doesn't mean we should be naive or completely let our guard down, because trust once broken takes a long time to be rebuilt and needs to be earned through consistent actions, and not just empty words. And most importantly, I learned that family is not defined only by blood ties, but also by conscious choices to be present, to support, to love, even when it's difficult, to forgive without forgetting, to establish healthy boundaries while keeping doors open for reconnection and growth. If you're going through something similar, if you have a son or daughter who has been pushed away from you by a manipulative partner. I want you to know that you are not alone, that there are many families living this silent pain. But I also want you to know that there is hope, that not everything is lost even when it seems like it is. The key is to remain firm in your love, not allow bitterness to take over your heart. Continue sending those messages of love even without response. Continue making it clear that you are there whenever your son or daughter needs you. Because eventually the truth comes to light. Eventually masks fall. And when that happens, you need to be there, ready to embrace without judgments, to support without saying, "I told you so," to rebuild without constantly throwing the past in their face. It's a long and painful path. I won't lie saying it's easy because it's not. There are many difficult days, many nights of crying, many moments of doubt, where you ask yourself if it's worth continuing to try. But yes, it's worth it. Every second of effort is worth it when you can finally hug your child again. When you finally see that genuine smile you hadn't seen for so long. When you finally feel that the family is reunited again, even if in a different way than it was before. For those who are in Mariana's position, who recognize in themselves those manipulative behaviors born from insecurity and fear, I beg you to seek help before it's too late, before you cause irreparable damage to the relationships that matter most. Your insecurities are valid, your fears are real, but the way you choose to deal with them defines whether you will build or destroy, whether you will unite or separate, whether you will create love or generate resentment. There is no shame in admitting you need help. There is no weakness in recognizing that your behaviors are problematic. In fact, this is the greatest demonstration of strength and maturity, having the courage to look at yourself honestly and say, "I need to change," and then do the necessary work for that change to happen. Therapy is not a sign of weakness, but of commitment to your own growth and to the health of your relationships. And the results can be transformative, not only for you, but for all the people around you who are affected by your behaviors, and for those who are the sons or daughters in the middle of this situation, trapped between love for your partner and love for your family. Feel encouraged to establish healthy boundaries, not to accept emotional manipulation even if it comes from someone you love, because true love doesn't control, doesn't isolate, doesn't manipulate. True love supports, encourages, builds bridges instead of walls. You have the right to maintain healthy relationships with your family of origin while building your own family. These things are not mutually exclusive, and any partner who tries to make you choose between one and the other is showing signs of abusive behavior that needs to be addressed immediately. Don't be afraid to seek professional help, to have difficult conversations, to defend your boundaries and your needs. Because at the end of the day, you deserve to have all your important relationships functioning in a healthy and harmonious way. You deserve peace, and not constant conflict. Looking back now, I realize that horrible Sunday when Mariana said I wasn't part of the family was paradoxically one of the most important moments of our family journey, because it brought to the surface problems that were being swept under the rug, forced conversations that needed to happen, initiated healing processes that had been necessary for a long time. If that hadn't happened in such a brutal and painful way, perhaps we would all have continued pretending everything was fine, while toxicity grew silently, until eventually destroying everything irreparably. So, in a strange and painful way, I'm almost grateful for that moment of crisis, because it gave us the opportunity to rebuild on more solid and honest foundations, to create a new, healthier, and more conscious family dynamic, where each person is valued and respected, and where problems are discussed openly instead of hidden behind forced smiles. The journey isn't over yet. Probably never will be, because relationships are continuous work that requires constant attention and care. But we are in a much better place than we were, and that's all that matters. Progress, and not perfection. Each day is a new opportunity to strengthen our bonds, to practice honest communication, to choose love and understanding instead of resentment and bitterness. And I am committed to making these choices every day for the rest of my life, because my family is my greatest treasure and is worth any effort necessary to keep it united and healthy. Raphael is happy again. That sparkle has returned to his eyes. And seeing my son flourishing this way, after everything we've been through, is the greatest reward I could receive. It's proof that every tear was worth it, every sleepless night, every moment of pain. Because in the end, loved one, the family remained united, and we are all stronger and more aware than ever. So if you read this entire long and sometimes painful story all the way through, I hope you found something valuable, whether it's comfort knowing you're not alone in your family struggles, hope that difficult situations can improve with time and effort, or simply validation that your feelings are legitimate and your experiences are important. I would very much like to hear your own stories in the comments below, your experiences with complicated family dynamics, how you dealt or are dealing with similar situations. Because I believe that sharing our stories connects us as humans and helps us feel less alone in this crazy journey that is life. If this story touched you in any way, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, because your support encourages me to continue sharing these real and authentic experiences that can help other people who are going through similar situations. And most importantly, if you're in a difficult situation now, don't give up. Keep your heart open but your boundaries firm. Continue loving even when it's difficult. Continue having faith even when it seems impossible. Because you never know when the turnaround will happen. When that person you love will finally open their eyes. When healing will begin. And you need to be there, present and ready, when that moment arrives. Because your love may be exactly what someone needs to find their way back home.